It was a Wednesday when everything fell apart. The kind of evening that seemed perfectly ordinary at first. Nothing spectacular, no warning signs. But as I sit here, writing this, I can't help but realize that it all started then. I came home from work, tired as usual, my mind still on the piles of paperwork I had left behind on my desk. She was already home, of course. She always was by the time I got in. I could hear the sound of the TV, some mindless reality show she liked to watch. The kind that never really mattered, yet seemed to occupy her thoughts for hours. I dropped my keys in the bowl by the door, took off my jacket, and walked into the living room. She was sitting there, her feet tucked under her, eyes fixed on the screen, a glass of wine in hand. She looked up as I walked in, her face lighting up with that smile that had always made me feel like I was the most important person in the room. "Hey," she said, her voice soft, almost inviting. "How was your day?" I sighed and sat down next to her, slinging an arm around her shoulder as I leaned back into the couch. "Same as always. Busy. How about you?" She gave a little shrug. "You know, the usual." We exchanged a few more words, the usual pleasantries, before the conversation drifted to a strange place. A place I wasn't prepared for. It started innocently enough. She told me about some new colleague of hers, a man named Patrick. Apparently, he was charming, good-looking, everything I wasn't, at least in her eyes. She spoke about him with that mix of admiration and distance that I didn't quite understand. I could tell she was holding something back, but I didn't want to press it. But then, as the evening wore on, something shifted in her tone. It was subtle at first, just a slight change in the way she was looking at me, a shift in her body language. She leaned in a little closer, and then she said something that would stay with me forever. "You know, Patrick is different," she said, almost as if it was some kind of secret she was finally revealing. "He's so confident, so sure of himself. Like, he really knows what he wants out of life. He's assertive. I guess it's kind of refreshing, you know?" I stared at her, the words sinking in. She wasn't even looking at me anymore. Her eyes were glued to the screen, like she was avoiding my gaze. But I couldn't avoid hers. The subtext in her words was undeniable. She continued, her voice a little quieter now. "Sometimes I wish you could be a bit more like him. More spontaneous. You know, take charge a little more." I felt the ground shift beneath me. I had always prided myself on being the responsible one, the stable one. But hearing this now, hearing her compare me to some guy I had never met, made me feel like I was nothing more than a placeholder in her life. A safe bet. For the first time in years, I felt exposed. It was like she had peeled back a layer of me that I hadn't even known existed. She didn't say it outright, but the implication was clear. She was bored with me. I wanted to respond, to tell her that I was still the same man she'd married, that I could be spontaneous, I could take charge, if she wanted me to. But the words didn't come. Instead, I just nodded quietly, a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes forming on my lips. "Yeah," I said, my voice flat. "I get it." And just like that, the moment passed. She went back to her show, and I went back to my thoughts, my mind spiraling. How long had she felt this way? How long had she been waiting for me to be something I wasn't? Was she just saying this out of frustration, or had it really been building up for a while? I didn't know. But the next morning, I woke up with a sinking feeling in my stomach. The kind of feeling that only comes when you realize something inside you has changed, when you realize that the person you thought you knew so well, the person you thought you could trust, might not feel the same way about you anymore. It was an ordinary Wednesday, but everything had shifted. I could feel it in the air, like a storm on the horizon. Something had been cracked open, and I couldn't unsee it. That evening, as I left for work, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. I didn't recognize the man staring back at me. I didn't know what I had become, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't the man she wanted me to be. And that realization made me question everything about my marriage, my life, and the future we'd been building together. The next few days felt like a dream. Or maybe it was more like a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. I was walking around in a fog, unable to grasp what was real anymore. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, trying to make sense of it all. What did she mean by more spontaneous? What did she see in him, in Patrick, that she didn't see in me? I never considered myself a boring guy. Sure, I was the stable one, the dependable one, but I always thought that was a good thing. I thought that was what she wanted. Or was it? Had she been secretly wishing for someone who could sweep her off her feet, someone who could make her feel alive? Someone like Patrick? I tried to ignore it, to push it to the back of my mind. But then something else happened. It was subtle, like the flicker of a light that catches your attention in the corner of your eye. One evening, about a week after that conversation, I came home late from work. I was exhausted, both physically and emotionally, and I had a million things on my mind. But when I walked through the door, the house was eerily quiet. I called out to her, but there was no response. I assumed she was in the bathroom or somewhere else in the house. But as I moved through the rooms, something didn't sit right. Her phone was on the kitchen counter. It wasn't unusual for her to leave it there, but tonight, for some reason, it felt off. And then I saw it. A text message notification, just enough to catch my eye. It was from him. Patrick. I stood there for a moment, staring at the screen. The message was innocent enough at first glance, something about a work event, but there was something in the tone of it that made my stomach churn. It wasn't the content that bothered me. It was the familiarity, the intimacy that seemed to bleed through the words. Can't wait to see you again. I think we should grab dinner sometime soon. Just the two of us. I felt a wave of nausea hit me. This wasn't just a friendly colleague reaching out. This was something else. There was an undercurrent of something deeper, something more personal. I wanted to confront her right then and there, but the words wouldn't come. My mind was spinning, my hands trembling. How could I ask her about this? How could I confront her without sounding paranoid or insecure? I decided to wait. I put the phone back where it was and tried to act normal when she came home. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was living in a house of cards, one small nudge away from everything collapsing. That night, she was unusually distant. She didn't seem to notice my discomfort, or maybe she did, but she didn't care. We ate dinner in silence, and every time I tried to engage in a conversation, she seemed distracted. Her mind was elsewhere, and I couldn't help but wonder if that elsewhere was him. Patrick. I wanted to scream at her, to demand answers, but I didn't. I wasn't that person. I had never been that person. Instead, I silently watched as she drifted further and further away. Days passed, and the distance between us seemed to grow. We barely spoke unless we had to, and when we did, it felt hollow. I couldn't ignore the shift in her. She wasn't the woman I had married. She wasn't the woman who would talk to me for hours about her dreams and fears. She wasn't the woman who would cuddle up with me on the couch at the end of a long day. But what was worse was that she wasn't the woman I had loved. Somewhere, somehow, she had changed, and I had been too blind to see it. One night, about a week later, she came home late. I was already in bed, pretending to sleep, but I could hear her. The sound of her heels clicking on the floor, the faint rustle of fabric as she undressed. She came into the room quietly, but I could hear her breathing, slow and steady, as though she was trying to hide something. I didn't move, didn't say a word. But when she climbed into bed beside me, I could feel the tension in her body. I didn't know if she thought I was asleep, or if she was simply avoiding eye contact. But I could sense the guilt. No, the fear, coming off her in waves. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like her husband. I felt like a stranger lying next to her, a stranger who didn't belong in the same bed. And when she finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper, it was like the air in the room froze. "I'm sorry," she said. I froze. The words hit me like a ton of bricks. What was she apologizing for? I wanted to ask her, but I didn't. I couldn't bring myself to say anything. "I didn't mean for things to get like this," she continued, her voice trembling. "I've been so distracted, so caught up in everything. And you're always so focused on work, on everything else, that I don't feel like you see me anymore." I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. Was she really blaming me for this? Was she really telling me that it was my fault that she had drifted away? "I see you," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "But maybe you don't see me anymore." And just like that, the wall between us became even higher. The distance, once small and manageable, was now insurmountable. That night, as I lay in the dark, I couldn't help but wonder how we had gotten here. How had we gone from being so close, so in love, to this cold, distant version of ourselves? How had I missed the signs? How had I let it all slip away? I didn't have the answers, but I knew one thing for sure. Something had to change. The next few days were a blur. I went through the motions of life, but inside, my mind was a storm. I couldn't get over the words she had said that night. "You're always so focused on work, on everything else." It kept echoing in my head, over and over, like a broken record. Was I really that distant? Had I been so consumed by my career that I had lost sight of the one person who mattered most? The thought gnawed at me. I had never considered myself a workaholic, but maybe I was. Maybe I had become so wrapped up in the day-to-day grind that I had stopped paying attention to her needs, her wants, her emotions. And that realization, those words hanging in the air between us, brought me to a place I never thought I'd be. Was it too late? Could I fix this? But then came the weekend, and with it, a chain of events that would change everything. I was sitting at my desk on Saturday morning, mindlessly scrolling through emails, when I heard the sound of the front door opening. It was early, and she hadn't mentioned any plans for the day. I figured she was just running errands, but when I heard her voice from the hallway, something didn't feel right. She wasn't talking to me. She was talking to someone else. I stood up, confused, and walked towards the sound of her voice. As I rounded the corner into the living room, I froze. There she was, standing by the door with Patrick. Yes, Patrick. The man she had mentioned weeks ago, the one she had compared me to. They were laughing, casually chatting, as though everything was normal. The sight of them together, so comfortable, so easy with each other, felt like a punch to the gut. I didn't know what to do. Should I confront them? Should I just walk away and pretend I hadn't seen anything? But I couldn't tear my eyes away. I stood there in the doorway, barely breathing, watching them. She was looking at him in a way that I hadn't seen in months. A look of warmth, of familiarity. And when he reached out to touch her arm, I felt the ground beneath me crack. Suddenly, she turned and saw me standing there. The color drained from her face, and for a split second, I thought she might say something. But she didn't. She just smiled weakly and walked over to me, her steps hesitant, as if she wasn't sure how to explain herself. "Hey," she said, trying to sound casual, but I could hear the tension in her voice. "I didn't know you were home." I could barely speak. My throat felt dry, like I was choking on the words I wanted to say. How could she be so casual about this? How could she stand there with him, like everything was fine, when I knew what was happening? It felt like a betrayal, like she had been hiding something from me all along. "Patrick was just dropping by," she said, her words stumbling out. "We were just talking about some work stuff. Nothing serious." I didn't respond right away. I couldn't. I was too angry, too hurt to say anything. All I could do was look at her, my mind racing, my heart pounding in my chest. "I didn't know you two were so close," I finally said, the words sharp and bitter. Her expression faltered, just for a moment. But then, she straightened up, almost as if she was trying to defend herself. "We're just friends," she insisted, but there was something in her eyes that I couldn't ignore. It wasn't guilt, but it wasn't the sincerity I used to see either. It was something else, something I couldn't quite place. Before I could respond, Patrick cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the tension in the room. "I should get going," he said, giving me a nod. "It was nice seeing you again, Evelyn. We'll talk soon." And just like that, he was gone. I stood there in the silence that followed, the air thick with unspoken words. Evelyn didn't say anything immediately, and I didn't know what to say either. I was at a loss. My mind was spinning. Was this really happening? Was this the moment I had been dreading? Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry, okay? But you have to understand. It's not what you think." But it wasn't just what I thought, it was what I knew. The way she looked at him, the way she smiled when he touched her arm, it wasn't just friendship. And the more I tried to tell myself that I was being paranoid, the more the reality settled in. Something had shifted. Something was happening between them, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. "Don't lie to me," I said, my voice trembling now. "I'm not stupid, Evelyn. I see what's going on." She flinched, her eyes welling up with tears. "Please, just listen to me," she begged, but the words felt empty. "I'm not trying to hurt you. I don't know what happened. It's just, things have been different between us for so long, and Patrick, he gets me. He listens." I felt like the room was closing in on me. She was standing there, crying, but all I could hear was the sting in her words. He gets me. Was I so distant, so lost in my own world, that I had missed this? That I had let her slip away right in front of my eyes? I didn't know how to react. The anger, the hurt, the confusion all collided within me. "How long has this been going on?" I asked, my voice quiet, but sharp. "I swear, nothing's happened yet," she said quickly, but I could hear the uncertainty in her tone. "But I've been thinking about it. About us. And I don't know what I want anymore. Her words cut through me like a knife. She didn't know what she wanted anymore. That was the moment it hit me, the brutal truth. She had already made up her mind. The connection between us had been broken for a long time, and I hadn't even realized it. I couldn't stay there, in that room with her, hearing those words. I turned and walked out of the house, leaving her standing there, calling after me, but I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I needed space. I needed to think. I walked aimlessly through the streets, the cold night air biting at my skin, but I couldn't feel it. All I could feel was the numbness inside me, the weight of everything crashing down. It wasn't just about Patrick anymore. It was about everything. My marriage. My life. The years I had spent believing that things were fine, when in reality, they were falling apart. And in that moment, I realized something that shook me to my core. The person I thought I knew, the person I had loved, wasn't the person standing in front of me anymore. And I didn't know how to get her back. I walked aimlessly through the streets that night, trying to escape the storm inside my chest. I didn't even know where I was going. My legs carried me, but my mind was a million miles away. The biting cold of the evening air didn't register, nor did the city noises around me. Everything felt muffled, as if I were walking through some sort of dream. How had I not seen this coming? How had I let it go on for so long, assuming that everything would work itself out? The truth was simple, but it was hard to accept. I had been blind. I had been so wrapped up in my own routine, in the small comfort of predictability, that I hadn't noticed the cracks forming between us. I hadn't even noticed that she was slipping away. Evelyn had always been the center of our world, but I had become so focused on keeping the world spinning that I hadn't taken the time to see what was happening within it. My phone buzzed in my pocket, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was a message from her. The screen lit up with just a single line. "We need to talk." I stopped walking. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. "We need to talk." That was the phrase that haunted every failing relationship, the phrase that marked the beginning of the end. It was a phrase that carried so much weight, yet felt so empty at the same time. I knew what she was going to say, and I dreaded hearing it. I wasn't ready for this conversation. I wasn't ready to hear that she had made her decision, that we were finished. But deep down, I knew it was coming. The distance had become too vast, the silence between us too loud. I ignored the message for a few moments, just standing there on the street, trying to gather my thoughts, to find some sense of control over the chaos inside me. I knew I had to go back. I had to face her, even though I didn't want to. I had to face the truth of what had been happening for weeks, maybe even months. I made my way back home, my heart heavy with each step. When I opened the door, I was greeted by the silence. No TV playing, no laughter, no sounds of her moving around. It was as though the house had fallen silent, frozen in time. She was sitting on the couch when I walked in, her eyes red from crying, her hands folded in her lap. She looked up at me, and for a moment, I saw the same woman I had fallen in love with. But just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by a stranger. "Do you want to talk?" she asked, her voice shaky but determined. I nodded, my throat tight. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to start. Everything felt so wrong. So much had been left unsaid, and now it all came rushing back to the surface. "I don't know what to say, Evelyn," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what to feel anymore." She looked away for a moment, her fingers trembling as she wiped away a tear. "I've been so selfish," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I never meant for things to get this far. But I've been so unhappy for so long, and I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know how to tell you. How to tell you that I was falling out of love with you. I didn't know how to respond to that." The words sliced through me, leaving me breathless. Falling out of love with me? Was this really happening? Had I missed every sign? Had I been so focused on everything else that I hadn't seen that she was drifting away, piece by piece? I sat down next to her, the space between us now feeling like a chasm. "I thought we were happy," I said quietly. "I thought we had something real. How could you just fall out of love with me?" Her voice trembled as she spoke. "It's not about you. It's about me. I don't know when it happened, but somewhere along the way, I stopped feeling like I was enough. I started feeling invisible, like I was just going through the motions, doing what I was supposed to do. I thought I could ignore it, but I couldn't. And then Patrick, he made me feel seen. He made me feel important again." I felt the air leave my lungs as she said his name. It was like a slap in the face. She had mentioned him before, But now, hearing her speak so openly about him, it stung in a way I couldn't explain. I knew it wasn't his fault. He wasn't the problem. The problem was between us, in the space that had formed, unnoticed, until it was too late. You think he's the answer? I asked, my voice suddenly more sharp than I intended. You think running to him will fix everything? Her eyes widened, and she quickly shook her head. No, that's not what I mean. But he's been there for me. And I've been so lost. I didn't know how to come back to you. I didn't know how to fix what was broken. I wanted to scream at her, to demand that she wake up, to tell her that we could fix this together. But I didn't. I couldn't. Because deep down, I knew she was already gone. The Evelyn I had once known, the woman I had married, wasn't standing in front of me anymore. And no matter how hard I tried to hold on to her, I knew I couldn't make her feel something she no longer felt. We sat there in silence for a long time, the weight of her words hanging between us, suffocating any attempt at reconciliation. The person who had once been my everything had become a stranger, and I didn't know how to bring her back. I don't know what to do, I whispered, feeling utterly helpless. I don't know how to fix this. She looked at me then, her eyes filled with regret, but also resignation. I don't think I can fix this anymore, either. And that, right there, was the moment I knew it was over. There was no going back. We had both tried, in our own ways, to salvage what was left of our marriage, but the truth was undeniable. It had already fallen apart. I stood up and walked to the door, the weight of everything crashing down on me. I didn't say another word to her as I left. I didn't know what to say, and I didn't know what would happen next. All I knew was that nothing would ever be the same again. I walked aimlessly through the streets that night, trying to escape the storm inside my chest. I didn't even know where I was going. My legs carried me, but my mind was a million miles away. The biting cold of the evening air didn't register, nor did the city noises around me. Everything felt muffled, as if I were walking through some sort of dream. How had I not seen this coming? How had I let it go on for so long, assuming that everything would work itself out? The truth was simple, but it was hard to accept. I had been blind. I had been so wrapped up in my own routine, in the small comfort of predictability, that I hadn't noticed the cracks forming between us. I hadn't even noticed that she was slipping away. Evelyn had always been the center of our world, but I had become so focused on keeping the world spinning that I hadn't taken the time to see what was happening within it. My phone buzzed in my pocket, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was a message from her. The screen lit up with just a single line. We need to talk. I stopped walking. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. We need to talk. That was the phrase that haunted every failing relationship, the phrase that marked the beginning of the end. It was a phrase that carried so much weight, yet felt so empty at the same time. I knew what she was going to say, and I dreaded hearing it. I wasn't ready for this conversation. I wasn't ready to hear that she had made her decision, that we were finished. But deep down, I knew it was coming. The distance had become too vast, the silence between us too loud. I ignored the message for a few moments, just standing there on the street, trying to gather my thoughts, to find some sense of control over the chaos inside me. I knew I had to go back. I had to face her, even though I didn't want to. I had to face the truth of what had been happening for weeks, maybe even months. I made my way back home, my heart heavy with each step. When I opened the door, I was greeted by the silence. No TV playing, no laughter, no sounds of her moving around. It was as though the house had fallen silent, frozen in time. She was sitting on the couch when I walked in, her eyes red from crying, her hands folded in her lap. She looked up at me, and for a moment, I saw the same woman I had fallen in love with. But just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by a stranger. "Do you want to talk?" she asked, her voice shaky, but determined. I nodded, my throat tight. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to start. Everything felt so wrong. So much had been left unsaid, and now it all came rushing back to the surface. "I don't know what to say, Evelyn," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what to feel anymore." She looked away for a moment, her fingers trembling as she wiped away a tear. "I've been so selfish," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I never meant for things to get this far. But I've been so unhappy for so long, and I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know how to tell you. How to tell you that I was falling out of love with you. I didn't know how to respond to that." The words sliced through me, leaving me breathless. Falling out of love with me? Was this really happening? Had I missed every sign? Had I been so focused on everything else that I hadn't seen that she was drifting away, piece by piece? I sat down next to her, the space between us now feeling like a chasm. I thought we were happy, I said quietly. I thought we had something real. How could you just fall out of love with me? Her voice trembled as she spoke. It's not about you. It's about me. I don't know when it happened, but somewhere along the way, I stopped feeling like I was enough. I started feeling invisible, like I was just going through the motions, doing what I was supposed to do. I thought I could ignore it, but I couldn't. And then Patrick, he made me feel seen. He made me feel important again. I felt the air leave my lungs as she said his name. It was like a slap in the face. She had mentioned him before, but now, hearing her speak so openly about him, it stung in a way I couldn't explain. I knew it wasn't his fault. He wasn't the problem. The problem was between us, in the space that had formed, unnoticed, until it was too late. You think he's the answer? I asked, my voice suddenly more sharp than I intended. You think running to him will fix everything? Her eyes widened, and she quickly shook her head. No, that's not what I mean. But he's been there for me. And I've been so lost. I didn't know how to come back to you. I didn't know how to fix what was broken. I wanted to scream at her, to demand that she wake up, to tell her that we could fix this together. But I didn't. I couldn't. Because deep down, I knew she was already gone. The Evelyn I had once known, the woman I had married, wasn't standing in front of me anymore. And no matter how hard I tried to hold on to her, I knew I couldn't make her feel something she no longer felt. We sat there in silence for a long time, the weight of her words hanging between us, suffocating any attempt at reconciliation. The person who had once been my everything had become a stranger, and I didn't know how to bring her back. I don't know what to do, I whispered, feeling utterly helpless. I don't know how to fix this. She looked at me then, her eyes filled with regret, but also resignation. I don't think I can fix this anymore, either. And that, right there, was the moment I knew it was over. There was no going back. We had both tried, in our own ways, to salvage what was left of our marriage, but the truth was undeniable. It had already fallen apart. I stood up and walked to the door, the weight of everything crashing down on me. I didn't say another word to her as I left. I didn't know what to say, and I didn't know what would happen next. All I knew was that nothing would ever be the same again. I spent the following days in a haze of disbelief. The house felt cold, sterile, like a place I used to live in but no longer recognized. I had thought I knew everything about Evelyn, her likes, her quirks, the way she laughed at the smallest jokes. But in those few days after we had spoken, I realized just how much of her I hadn't truly known. I kept hearing her words echo in my head. I was falling out of love with you. It was a phrase I had never imagined hearing from her. The person I had given everything to had just walked away, and I didn't know where to go from there. I didn't even know how to function in the silence. The house, which had always been our shared space, now felt like a prison. I could no longer remember the last time we had laughed together or had those late-night talks that made everything seem possible. Every corner of the house reminded me of the life we once shared, and now that life was slipping through my fingers like sand. I did everything I could to distract myself. I worked longer hours, buried myself in meetings, and even started picking up odd hobbies I had never tried before. Anything to keep my mind from wandering back to her, back to the empty space she had left behind. But no matter how much I tried to push it all down, the reality kept coming back, relentless and unforgiving. She was gone, not just physically but emotionally. I could feel it deep in my bones. The woman who had once been my everything had walked out, leaving nothing but the shell of the life we had built. Then one night, when I had convinced myself that I could finally move on, something unexpected happened. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Evelyn. I had no idea what to expect. Maybe she was apologizing again. Maybe she was trying to explain herself one more time, but I couldn't bring myself to open it right away. Instead, I sat there staring at the screen for what felt like an eternity. What did she want now? Had she changed her mind? Or was this just another attempt to let me down easy? Finally, I opened it. The message was short, but it made my heart stop. Can we talk? I need to explain. Please, meet me. It wasn't the message I had expected, but it was one I couldn't ignore. Part of me wanted to dismiss it, to shut the door on whatever she wanted to say. After all, I had already been through enough. I had already heard the truth, the raw, painful truth, and I didn't know if I had the strength to hear more. But another part of me, the part that still cared, the part that still hoped, told me I had to see her. I had to hear what she had to say. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her. We arranged to meet at a small cafe near the edge of town, one of those places that neither of us had visited in years, but that held memories of happier times. When I arrived, she was already there, sitting at a corner table, her back to the door. The moment I saw her, I knew something had changed. There was no confidence in her posture, no sparkle in her eyes. She was slumped forward, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. I took a deep breath and walked over to the table, feeling a mixture of anger, confusion, and a strange sadness that I couldn't quite place. When she looked up, I saw the tears in her eyes before she even spoke. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice trembling. "I know I hurt you. I know I broke everything. I don't even know how to begin to make it right." I sat down across from her, my own emotions threatening to spill over. "You didn't just break things, Evelyn. You shattered them. You made a choice, and that choice wasn't me. You walked away without looking back." She winced at my words, and for a moment, I saw the woman I once loved, a woman who was hurting, just like I was. Her eyes filled with regret. "I didn't mean for it to happen like this. I thought I could fix it before it got this bad, but I couldn't. I lost myself, and in the process, I lost you." Her words, soft and fragile, felt like a dagger to my heart. She wasn't just apologizing. She was telling me she had chosen him, Patrick, over me. She had chosen someone else to fill the emptiness I couldn't fill, and as much as I wanted to deny it, I knew it was the truth. "Did you ever love me, Evelyn?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Or was I just the safe option, the guy who always played by the rules?" She didn't answer right away. She just looked at me, her eyes filled with pain, and for the first time in weeks, I saw vulnerability in her. "I did love you," she finally said, her voice cracking. "I still do, in a way. But I wasn't happy, and I thought maybe I could find happiness with someone else. Someone who saw me, really saw me. I thought I could make it work with Patrick, but now I realize that I've hurt everyone, including myself." I leaned back in my chair, trying to process everything she had said. The betrayal was still raw, but hearing her words, hearing her admit that she wasn't happy with me, hurt more than I ever thought it could. This wasn't just about Patrick. It was about the life we had built, the foundation we had set together, that she had now walked away from. "You made your choice," I said, the words coming out cold, even though my insides were anything but. "And I'm not the one who can fix this. I can't be the person you run to when it gets hard. I can't keep living in the shadow of your indecision." She nodded, wiping away the tears that had started to fall freely. "I know, and I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even know if I can forgive myself." I sat there, staring at her, realizing just how much we had both changed. She wasn't the woman I had married. I wasn't the man she thought I was. The pieces of us that had once fit together so perfectly had been scattered, torn apart by months of miscommunication, unspoken feelings, and unmet needs. I stood up, pushing the chair back with a force I didn't intend. "I need to go," I said, my voice distant, as if I were speaking to a stranger. As I turned and walked away, I felt like a part of me was leaving the cafe with her. Maybe it was the part of me that had held on too long, the part that had hoped for a different outcome. But it didn't matter anymore. There was no turning back now. The days that followed felt like a fog. I went through the motions, but every step was weighed down by the heaviness of the past. The reality of what had happened hit me with a force I hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just that Evelyn had chosen him over me, or that she had fallen out of love. It was the fact that she had stopped seeing me entirely. I wasn't even a person to her anymore. I was just a chapter in a book she had long since closed. The silence in the house was deafening. I tried to fill the void with work, with late nights at the office, anything to keep my mind occupied. But it never worked. The emptiness never left. I would come home, expecting things to feel different, but nothing ever did. The apartment that had once been filled with her laughter, her presence, was now nothing more than a cold shell. It was early one evening when I received another text from her. I hadn't heard from her in days, and the message was simple, almost too casual. "I need to return something. Can I come by?" I stared at the phone for a long time, debating whether or not to respond. Part of me wanted to say no, to close the door completely, to never look back. But another part of me, the part that still cared, no matter how much I wanted to deny it, told me I couldn't turn her away. So I agreed. She showed up about an hour later, looking just as she always had. Her hair was a little messy, and her eyes were tired, but she was still the woman I knew. Or, at least, the version of her I thought I knew. She stepped inside without saying a word, her eyes flickering nervously around the apartment, as though it were unfamiliar to her. "I just wanted to return your jacket," she said quietly, holding up a jacket I had left behind the last time we were out. Her voice was strained, like she wasn't sure what to say or how to say it. I didn't respond at first. Instead, I stood there, watching her. I could feel the weight of everything between us, like an invisible wall that neither of us knew how to break down. I had imagined this moment 1,000 times in my head, what I would say, what I would do. But now that she was standing there, all I could do was look at her, at this woman who had once been my everything, and try to reconcile who she was now with the person I had known before. She handed me the jacket, but I didn't take it right away. I was still processing the fact that she was standing there, in front of me, as though nothing had happened, as though we hadn't just torn our entire world apart. "Evelyn," I said her name softly, as if testing it on my tongue. "What do you want from me?" Her eyes flickered, and she shifted uncomfortably. "I don't know," she replied honestly. "I don't know what I want anymore. I needed to see you." I could feel the anger rising within me, but I swallowed it down, knowing it wouldn't do me any good. "You needed to see me? After everything? After what you did?" She winced at my words, and I saw the guilt flash across her face. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to understand. But I need you to know that it wasn't easy. It wasn't just about Patrick. It was about me, too. I was lost, and I thought that maybe finding someone else would fill the emptiness inside me." I laughed bitterly, the sound harsh in the silence. "So that's it then? You thought someone else would fix you? And now you're here, thinking you can just come back and like nothing's happened?" She shook her head, tears welling in her eyes again. "No, it's not like that. I don't want to come back in. I wanted to see you. I wanted you to understand that I'm not the person I was when I left. I'm not the person who walked out on you. I can't undo what I've done, but I'm sorry. I really am." Her apology felt hollow. The words sounded genuine, but something in the way she said them didn't sit right with me. She was asking for forgiveness, but I realized, in that moment, that I didn't know if I could give it to her. I didn't know if I could forgive her for everything. The lies, the betrayal, the years spent thinking everything was okay when it wasn't. I felt a flood of emotions. Anger, pain, regret, but mostly, there was just numbness. The woman who had once been my best friend, the one I trusted with everything, had broken me, and now she was standing in front of me, expecting what? Closure? Redemption? I didn't know. I didn't care. All I knew was that I was tired of being the one who held everything together. I was tired of being the one who had to fix it all. "I can't do this, Evelyn," I said, my voice low and steady. "I can't keep living in the past. I can't keep wondering what could have been if things had turned out differently. I can't go back to who we were. Not after everything." She nodded slowly, as though she had expected me to say that, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence was heavy, suffocating, and the weight of it was almost unbearable. "I understand," she whispered. "I really do." I looked at her one last time, seeing the woman I had once loved, but also seeing the stranger she had become. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew that part of my life was over. I didn't know if I could ever trust her again. I didn't know if I could ever forgive her. But what I did know was that I couldn't keep waiting for a version of her that no longer existed. I turned away from her, walking toward the door, my heart aching with every step. "Goodbye, Evelyn." I didn't look back as I closed the door behind me. I didn't need to. The next few weeks felt like a blur. The silence between Evelyn and me had become a steady presence in my life, but something inside me had started to shift. I had spent so long holding on to what we had, so long hoping that one day, things would go back to how they were, but I realized now that the past couldn't be rewritten. I couldn't keep looking back at what was lost. I had to focus on what was ahead. It wasn't easy, and it didn't happen overnight, but slowly, I started to rebuild. I spent more time with friends, reconnected with old hobbies, and focused on the things I had pushed aside for so long. It was painful at first. There were days when the weight of everything felt unbearable, when I would sit alone in my apartment and wonder what went wrong. But I kept moving forward, even when it felt like I was walking through life with a hole in my heart. One day, after what felt like an eternity, I found myself in a park near my apartment, sitting on a bench, just watching people go by. The weather was crisp, and the world around me felt vibrant, alive, almost as if everything had a purpose, and I was slowly becoming part of it again. I wasn't quite sure where this sense of peace had come from, but I welcomed it. And then, I saw her. Evelyn was walking toward me, her eyes scanning the park as if she were searching for something or someone. When she spotted me, there was a brief moment of hesitation. She stopped in her tracks, unsure whether to approach. I could feel the tension in the air between us, but it wasn't as heavy as it had been before. It was different now. She was different. I stood up as she walked over, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel that old anger bubbling up inside me. I didn't feel the weight of the past crushing me. Instead, I felt calm, like I had finally come to terms with everything. "Hey," she said softly, standing a few feet away. "I didn't expect to see you here." I smiled, and to my surprise, it felt genuine. I could say the same. "But it's a nice day, isn't it?" She nodded, glancing around at the people strolling by. "It is. I've been trying to find some clarity, and, I don't know, I thought maybe we could talk. Really talk. Not about what happened, but about where we go from here." I wasn't sure how I felt about her words, but there was something in her voice, something vulnerable and real, that made me want to hear her out. "I think I'm finally starting to understand," she continued, her voice soft. "The way I treated you. I took you for granted. I let things slip away because I didn't know how to deal with my own mess. But I'm not that person anymore. I've learned a lot, and I don't want to lose the chance to at least be a part of your life again." I was quiet for a moment, taking in her words. I hadn't expected this. I had thought that chapter was closed. But standing here now, looking at her, I realized something. I wasn't the same person I had been either. I had spent so much time holding on to the hurt, but I knew I couldn't keep doing that. I had to let go. "I don't know what the future holds, Evelyn," I said honestly, my voice steady but calm. "But I'm not angry anymore. I've had time to heal, to figure out who I am without everything that happened between us. And I think I'm ready to move forward. Not as who we were, but as who we've become." She smiled softly, a hint of hope in her eyes. "I understand, and I'll respect that. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry, truly, and that I hope, even if we're not the same as before, maybe we can still find a way to build something new. Not rushing, just taking it one step at a time." I nodded, feeling something inside me shift. It wasn't about going back to what we had, because that was impossible. But maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for something new. A chance for forgiveness. A chance to heal together, even if it was in a different way. "I think we can try that," I said, smiling at her for the first time in weeks. One step at a time. And with that, something in me clicked into place. The past was still there, but it no longer had control over me. I had taken the time to heal, to find myself again, and I had come out the other side stronger. I didn't know what would happen between us, or where we would go, but I finally realized that it didn't matter. What mattered was that I was okay. I was moving forward. And whatever came next, I knew I would face it with a clearer mind, a stronger heart, and the courage to embrace whatever life had in store. Evelyn and I sat on the bench for a while, just talking about anything and everything. It felt natural, easy, like it used to be. Not the same, but different, better, in a way. We both had our scars, but we also had a newfound respect for each other. I didn't know where this would lead, but for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about the future. Maybe it wasn't about trying to recreate the past. Maybe it was about learning from it and finding the strength to move forward, together or apart. As the sun began to set, casting a warm golden glow over the park, I knew one thing for certain. Life was full of unexpected turns, and while I couldn't change what had happened, I could still choose how to move forward. And that, in the end, was all that mattered.